Well, folks, once again, welcome back to my basement boatyard. Captain Boat Builder here with you for another exciting episode. This is episode number 10, and we're calling this one More Fun in the Basement. I can't tell you how much I enjoy doing these little projects on the boat. It's just one step at a time. I'm glad that I don't have a schedule because I'm able to fix things that I do incorrectly, and I'm able to spend time on things that really take more time than they should. But I can't tell you how much I enjoy working here in the basement. So tonight we're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about, as I said, tonight we're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about the dagger board case. We're going to talk about working on the planks, applying an extra, shall we call it the gloss coat. And we're going to talk about the foils. And remember, if you go back to episode number 5, you'll see that I was working on the foils then. I'm still working on them now, and they're just going to be fantastic. It's taken forever, but in my opinion, it's worth it. So again, more fun in the basement here, episode number 10. Well, now I'm going to be cutting the slot for the dagger board on the bottom of the boat. And I'm starting on the bottom of the boat because if I make any mistakes, it's easier to correct them here and cover them up than when I do the exact same cut on the inside of the boat on the top of the deck. So I'm starting on the bottom as a practice. And I'll be using my router right here and with a bit that's referred to as a bottom bearing. I guess this is the bottom bearing right here. Bottom bearing flush cut bit, so that it looks like the cutter blade, which is here, is in the same plane as the bottom bearing. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to make a cut that's going to look just like this. This is from the instruction manual. So you can see you don't cut the case, you cut the deck edge, excuse me, the bottom edge. This is the boat bottom. You cut it right up to the same plane as the inside of the dagger board case, and any glue that was in here during the layup process that has oozed out is also going to be cut. So we get a nice smooth cut all the way around, and we will have to square these corners just a little bit. But that's what I'm doing now, and again, this is a practice for the cut on the inside of the boat. I want to make a mistake where it's easy to cover it up if I make a mistake. Well, the router work for the dagger board slot really worked out better than I expected. This surface right here is very, very smooth. Whatever epoxy had oozed out of this joint has been cut off, and you can see this is the aft end. You can see right here there's a little place where I need to add some more epoxy for strength and also for sealing. And then looking at the forward edge, maybe a little bit more there. And this will all be done before I put in the fiberglass wear strips. You can see that this part right here could have just used a tiny bit more glue, but I wanted to be sure that it wasn't way too much. So the router work just turned out beautifully. I've never used this type of a bit, and I really had no trouble with it getting exactly the results that the manual would show. Now, one thing that I did want to check, and I'll show you how I did this, I wanted to be sure that once that I glued these fiberglass strips, they're actually not glued onto the board. They're glued right here. They're the wear strips. I wanted to be sure that there was just enough clearance so that I could actually get the board in and out. So what I've done, excuse me, I'm going to put the camera down, is I've taped these things temporarily to the board to simulate the thickness. And you can see here that the board slides up and down easily. So when I glue them on, there's not going to be a clearance problem. I'm trying to do all this with just one hand. But anyhow, this little cut just worked out perfectly. Gives me a lot of confidence to do the cut on the inside where everything is going to show. Here's the hole in the deck. This is the main deck. And this is the hole for the dagger board. You can see got a pretty nice edge on it. I'm going to be coating this with at least one coat of epoxy right along this open grain, just to be sure that it's sealed before I put the fiberglass wear strips on there. Well, now I have the fiberglass wear strips glued in. You can see here I got a really nice fit. I'm going to be doing a little bit right down there. I'm going to be sanding these bottom edges off inside, just a little rounding them over so there'll be no scratching of the dagger board. And you can see I did use a clamp to get a good contact here. I was able to just put the clamp like this, which worked out well. And the mixture that I used to glue it is the Resin Plus, this West 406 adhesive filler. That's what they recommended. And I will say that when you mix this stuff up and you mix it fairly thick, it's very, very sticky. So all of these pieces, once you push them into position, they just kind of stay in place by themselves, except this one right here just needed a little extra push. So I'm waiting for this to set up. I'll be sanding these edges and using some clear epoxy to seal it up. But the top's finished and should be just as easy to do the bottom when I finally turn the boat over. Just wanted to show you one more thing. I've mentioned this before, but I'm still doing it. You can see here how I've got the boat rocked up on its side, got a line that goes up to the ceiling and over there and tied it off, and I've got the straps holding it in position. And what I was trying to do is I'm trying to get this section of the bottom on the inside that's outlined with the blue tape, trying to get it just about flat so that when I put resin on, I don't have to worry about it running. And later I'm going to take this part right here and I'm going to roll the boat even further so that when I do these top two planks, they'll be almost flat and I shouldn't have any problem with the resin running. And what I've done in preparation for the varnish, which is my favorite part of the process, I think it's some kind of a sickness, but I really like doing varnish. I have what amounts to the first coat, the fill coat, and two of what you want to call the gloss coats. So there's actually now 4 coats of epoxy over the fiberglass on the inside of the boat. And what that does is it gives me a little bit extra thickness to work with when I'm sanding as best I can in preparation for the first coat of varnish. So I have just a little bit more resin to work with and a little bit more material to sand away in an attempt to get it perfectly flat before I start the varnish. Just another shot of how I've been putting on the second gloss coat. You can see here from the tape, you can see the area that I'm working on. These are the top 2 planks. And now that I've got the boat not quite on its side, but almost, I'm not having any trouble with the epoxy running. It's gives you a nice smooth finish and you don't have to worry about drips. So that saves a lot of time. And you can see the rig I've got set up here for holding the boat on its side. I've got it stabilized with ropes in 2 different directions and the straps, and I've even got a small line that ties the horses together, because since the boat's on its side and it's curving up as it goes to the horses forward and aft, now there might be a tendency to push the horses apart. So anyhow, this is what I've been doing with the boat on its side. I will also use this technique for varnishing, which I've done in the past. Makes it very easy to lay out the varnish without any runs. Also, I'm using epoxy on the inside edge of the fiberglass strips for the dagger board, smoothing those out and just making sure there won't be any chafe. So that's where I am now. I'm going to do the other side in a day or so, but it's just more of the same, and I'm getting ready for eventually for varnish, and pretty soon I'll be flipping the hull over and starting to work on the fiberglass on the outside. So here's an idea that I came up with for reinforcing the tips of the rudder and the dagger board. This is the rudder here, this is the dagger board here. So this fiberglass cloth, which you can see curves up like a cup. This is because when I fiberglassed the rudder and the dagger board. The cloth just hung over the edge like this, sort of like a curtain. And so what I realized is that it's made a very nice, almost like a little cup. And I'm going to be putting a little bit of resin in here, and then the next coat of glass will go over like this. And so you'll have a nice, solid, reinforced resin tip right here at the bottom of the rudder and the bottom of the dagger board. And I hope it works. Here you can see on the rudder how the fiberglass cloth sort of lays over the edge. See how it just kind of goes right over the edge and forms a nice curve, and that'll be reinforced by 3 coats of epoxy resin. This area that you see, this is the tip of the rudder, and that's reinforcing powder mixed with the resin to reinforce the tips. And what I found was when I did the other side first, and I just had the fiberglass cloth wrapped around one side, it actually formed sort of a cup that I could fill up with the compound and then ferret from the other side. And now it's covered, it's got fiberglass on both sides, so it made a really nice way to taper in this reinforced resin. And these are just turning out just in a fantastic way. The shaping is beautiful, and I'll be working on the edges, and I'll have a little bit of an explanation of how I'm doing it. This is different than the plan, and for me, I think it's worked out a little bit better. And like I say, I'll have a diagram for you. Here are the 2 foils. This is the dagger board, and over there's the rudder. This is 3 coats of epoxy, and I'm using a hand block to sand these to try and get them absolutely as smooth as possible. You can see here, this is just a little bit of the detail of the fiberglass that's been laid over from both sides, and that greenish looking stuff that you see there is actually resin that's in between the 2 layers of glass. These edges have turned out pretty well, although as you can see there's some places where they're sanded pretty thin, so I'm going to have to adjust the sanding on the rest of them. But I'm getting a really nice built up reinforced edge with the 2 layers of fiberglass. There's 1 from each side, and the epoxy. Here's the tip of the rudder, and this is the leading edge. Got a little more work to do on it. I'm probably going to do 1 more coat of epoxy. I've been block sanding these with 80 grit to get them as smooth as possible with no waviness, no wrinkles, no nothing. And I've done this before on previous builds, and after that it's going to be a buildup of about 7 or 8 coats of varnish, and I should be able to get them just about as fair as I want them. But this folding the fiberglass over on the edges and filling up the space with resin has actually worked out pretty well. Just a little test for those of you who might be watching this video, sipping your afternoon beverage, maybe trying to stay awake. I made another mistake, and I wanted to see if you caught it. When we looked at this one, I identified this as the leading edge. But as you can clearly see, that's the rudder and that's the trailing edge. So, did you catch it the first time? That's my mistake. Well, folks, as we finish up today, just wanted to give you a little preview of what's coming next. Of course, this is the transom, and I decided to experiment with fiberglassing the outside of the hull. I decided to experiment with the transom, small surface area. It's easy to work. So this is 4-ounce cloth, 1 layer, and it's 4 applications of epoxy. I wanted to be sure that I had plenty to sand so I could get it nice and smooth. I'm also testing out 2 different kinds of rollers to see which gives me the best application of the resin. So I'm getting ready to start fiberglassing the hull. The transom was practice, and we'll get deep into this in the next episode. So thanks again for watching. Hope you're enjoying it, and we'll see you again next time. So long.